Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. A little bit different today. We're going to be doing another review, but this one, I dare say, goes head-to-head against one of the most iconic games in the board game hobby in the first place, and this is Land versus Sea. Now, why am I talking about it like that? Because this is sort of Carcassonne-esque, all in a nutshell. Because this is tile laying area completion with marking of your own side, but doing it slightly differently. And doing it in just one small size of a box, right? Whereas with Carcassonne, as people say, usually the first question that goes along with Carcassonne is, what expansions should I get? Then you're inevitably, well, you know, getting 2 or 3 expansions and you don't utilize them or don't like some of them and prefer not to use some of them or whatever it may be. Now, with the newer Carcassonne editions, you can get, I believe the river comes in it. This was really what needs to be there in the first place. So the question, though, is how does Land versus Sea compare? What do you need to know about it? And is this something that you should pick up, especially versus old school classic Carcassonne? Let's weigh in on the pros and the cons of this, and let's go from there. Now, the first thing you need to know is, just like Carcassonne, this is a really simple game. This is not a game that's going to take you half an hour to learn. It's going to play just as quick. I would argue that this game is actually going to play you quicker than Carcassonne, which, if that's appealing, then you should be aware of that. Because essentially all you're doing, again, is you're playing these. Now, again, these are hex-based, so that creates a whole different side of things from Carcassonne. But the other interesting thing is they're double-sided. So you're getting different things on each side. And now the first time or two you play through, you're going to look at these and go, there's a bunch of stuff on there, and I don't really know what half that stuff does, and is it just cute art? And you'll go, yeah, it's cute art, and that's fine. But as you play a couple more times and you include some of those different modes, because the stuff is all there whether or not you use it. It's just you don't notice it until you read the additional section and says, oh, this is something else that I need to be aware of. This is adding another element to this tile about where I want to play it, how I want to play it, and what direction I want to play it, or even if I want to take it in the first place. It also solves one of the issues with Carcassonne in the first place about the AP or the analysis paralysis, or when you take your tile side of things, and sort of the house rule that a lot of people have adjusted to, because all you do is you take all the tiles at the beginning of the game, you put them in 2 stacks, and you can just take one from the top of the stack of one pile, or one from the top of the stack in the other pile. You can only see the one side, so you're just basing it off of that. You've got a 50-50, and there you go. So it simplifies and speeds it up from that element already. Now, the biggest problem is, obviously when you're hexing things, you can get a hex of all the way around. And so they solve that by having 2 specific tiles that if you ever have a landlocked situation or a water situation where you've got one spot in the middle that has to be water or land on all sides, well, they've got one special tile for each of those and how you deal with those rules. So they've thought of the pitfalls of doing something that is only, 2 elements of water and land on a tile in the first place. And the concept is very simple. It's not a difficult concept. You connect areas of water. You have to make sure that all sides on all of these tiles match. So you cannot have sides that do not match touching each other, whether that's 1 side, 2 side, 3 side, 4 side, 5 sides, or all 6 sides touching. They all have to match. And then whenever you enclose a land area or a water area, you score for how many tiles are in that area. That's the basic game. Boom, done. So again, more straightforward, quicker, easier just to get to the table. You don't have to explain the weird farmer rule and, that whole side of things. And is the castle here or is it's done. So very simplistic, very straightforward, but still very challenging because as you can see with a lot of these pieces, these are very odd pieces. These are very odd shapes. They are not routine. They are not run of the mill, which leads to very interesting dilemmas in terms of how far do I try to make this area? How big do I make it without trying to make it impossible to ever close? Because you're playing on a central board together. Like it's not, you don't make your own board. It's all conjoined. So you can easily, and this is where the other side of things of the Carcassonne comparison, you can put tiles in other people's ways to make them all of a sudden, whoa, that water place just got blown up. I'm not going to be able to close that now anytime soon. And because you play until the tiles are gone, you need to be very conscious of when or if I'm going to be able to close this in the first place, which is another line of thinking. I mean, the rule book flat out says, you know what? You should probably just try and make small areas so that you can score points. Do we score small areas and go for small areas? No, my wife and I went for big ones every single time. And that's the make it or break it. Can you do that? Can you afford to do that? Because there is a little bit of how well can you take that at the other person? And this has a little bit more take that. And so if you don't like that aspect of things, you're not going to like this. Now, this game also says 2 to 4 players. This is a 2-player game for me. Again, this is a 2-player game. I want complete control of my element, either land or sea. I don't really want to have someone else on my team, even if I can communicate. I just want to be able to do my own thing. So I look at this primarily as a 2-player game. Now, the other aspects that we talk about and the other elements that it adds is the mountains and coral and the caravans and ships. Things that I already showed you, very briefly, that are on the tiles already that you don't even realize and you don't even utilize in the first place when you start playing. And they say, you can add one and then you add the other. And if you really want a complex game, you can add both because they both alter the scoring conditions dramatically. In the tiles themselves, you will see that there are several different markers already even in the base game. And I'll show you this. There's little X's right here you can kind of see and make out on the tile. So if you control that area, it gets bonus points for those little X's, those little white X's. And then also there are 2 little other symbols that you need to be aware of. Now this is the starting token, but there's 2 other symbols that you need to be aware of. One is this one. That is the play again tile. So you play the second tile that you have in your hand. And because I didn't mention that, you have 2 tiles at every turn. So you have a choice every turn of essentially 4 different options because each of the tiles are double-sided. This one allows you to play immediately the other tile in your possession, however you want. And then the other one, we'll see if we can find it here really quickly. Here it is. It's 2 hands with 2 little swords on it, and that allows you to steal one of the other player's 2 tiles, so you can see what they've got, and you can say, okay, well, I see what you're trying to do with that, and I'm going to take it away from you. Can't play it again, but you can steal it in the first place. So, again, you get to interact depending on how you feel about that. Do you like the idea of that or not? Now, again, the other elements of these just add more ways to score. So the mountains and coral, for example, you have to have contiguous coral or contiguous mountains that score. But the interesting thing is when you add one each time, it scores again, which is very unique. And it really incentivizes you to make it as big as possible. And it also incentivizes the other person to potentially think, do I want to stop them by interrupting their mountains or their corals in the first place? Which is very, very interesting, adding another layer, depending on how you feel. So the last thing is the caravans and ships. And so again, it's a slightly more complicated, but still not terribly complicated, because you're making these groupings and you score immediately when you place either a ship or a caravan next to each other. So it doesn't matter just which one it is initially. But what matters at the end of the game is if you have a group of them touching each other, whoever has more. If there are more ships than caravans, you score a point for each one. So if there are 5 ships and caravans total, and there are 3 ships and 2 caravans, water is going to get 5 points because they have more ships than caravans. And if it's vice versa, land is going to score all of the points for each one that's individually in there. And there's wave points, but we won't talk about those. So it adds a lot of things. There are elements that you can layer upon layer upon layer. So what do I think of it? This is deceptively thinky. I was not expecting this. My wife and I went into this going, oh yeah, this is going to be cutesy. We're just going to lay a bunch of these tiles and it's going to be... There are some real tough decisions in terms of a little bit of AP when it comes to laying these, because these tiles are so different. There's no way of recalling which ones are which and how many of these are there and what shape is going to work and what shape is going to come up next. And so there's a lot of randomness when you're just taking the one off the top of the pile. And do you like that? I mean, with Carcassonne, you're just kind of grabbing a tile, right? When this one, you're taking one of the top 2 and everybody can, and both of you can see what's there, and you can be like, oh, don't take that one, don't take that one, don't take that one. Ah, crud, you took the one I wanted. And then another one pops up and you go, oh, okay, well, I guess I can deal with that. And also the stealing of other people's tiles and the playing of 2 tiles in a row can really be beneficial. But I know a lot of people aren't going to like that. And also the scoring, especially if you are doing multiple of these modes. with the little X's, with the ships, with the caravans, with the coral, with the mountains, and then having a huge area. I mean, we have had areas that are literally 40 plus points to score in this game in the first place. So when you're trying to count the tiles 3/4 of the way through the game of how many different tiles this lake or this sea is touching, and then you're counting the little X's, and then you're trying to count all the... I mean, there is some real... You can easily mess it up side of things. And that's going to be a little off-putting to people because it is a little bit more finicky in the scoring situation of making sure you're counting everything absolutely correctly because it's very easy to mess up. But does it work? Yeah, it works really well. I'm really surprised by it. I wasn't expecting to like this. I don't really play a whole lot of games like this. I've never really had an interest in Carcassonne. I just haven't. I mean, I understand the appeal. I understand the ease of access. But at the same time, if I can get this in a box for $25, I don't know why I'd go looking for expansions when I've got all of the different elements here. Because you're going to run into very similar issues with Carcassonne when you add the expansions, when you have huge fields, when you're trying to tile up and total up those points. So you're not going to have drastically different issues. And they even put the little scoring thing. You can't really see it that well without me spilling stuff, but they've got the little scoring thing right here. So you score right in the box. So you, again, don't have to have another little thing. So the box is small and self-contained and fits on your shelf well. So how do I feel about this? I don't know. Like, I'm going to be hard-pressed to actually get rid of this one. I was expecting this one to just end up on the trade pile. But adding at least in one of those separate modules makes it a little bit degree of difficulty better. And is it something I'm going to want to play all the time? No. Because I still, as much as I like it, as much as I enjoy that element of things, of the matching and the outwitting in terms of, you know, the matching up in the land versus the sea and making sure mine gets closed and yours maybe doesn't. There's also a little bit of those bigger areas. If you're going for those bigger areas, there's a little bit of, oh man, I got to try and figure this one out, or crud, you know, I lost the last game because I couldn't enclose my 50-point landmass by 2 tiles because she took the last one and the second to last turn that I needed. And is that going to frustrate you, or is that going to be something you're like, ah, sugar nuts? Well, let's play again later and, you know, it's no big deal. How infuriating would that be for you? For me, it wasn't terribly infuriating. I was like, ah, crud. But, okay, yeah, you got me. You got me. If you would have just taken that other one, it was fine. So, it's an interesting concept. It's nice to see something where I don't feel like I have to pick up an expansion or anything else like this, because I would be very happy with this just being as a self-contained game. So, yeah. Land versus Sea. Check it out, because this would make a great intro level game for someone to play with too, and to buy as like a housewarming gift. Because again, it's very easy to understand, it's very easy to get to the table, and it just works. So, there you go. Land versus Sea. Check it out. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. I'll see you around.